I said quickly, and I think we had reached out a little bit. But in doing my research, I've seen a lot more similarities. So I'm really excited to talk to you, kind of selfishly, because I've seen a lot of parallels in our journeys. And some of the language you've used on your website made me feel seen and slightly attacked, maybe, but more seen. So yeah, I'm happy to chop it up with you and learn a lot more about your journey and the things that you learned along the way. The first thing I'm looking down at my notes and I have a star by this one. You said you were a professional late bloomer on your website, and that struck me as one. So I want to start there. I want to learn a little bit more about what that means, and also like dive into that a little bit, because I'm noticing a significant amount of my audience that actually it seems to be growing, that's struggling with that sort of thing. And God knows I have, of like, oh, I'm too late. Oh, it's too late to reinvent myself. It's too late is really the gist of it. But let's talk about like, is it too late to be a late bloomer? Can you reinvent yourself? Is there anything wrong with it? And there's another piece, and then I'll shut up. Yeah, I love your little story, like your about me, like kind of story map that you had.
The timeline.
The timeline was really great. And there was one other part that I really identified with and empathized with, which was watching your friends like take off into corporate jobs.
Oh God. Oh my God. When I was an intern at 29 and I barely entered. Yeah. No, I mean, so, and look, and I think especially now with social media, there's this constant low drum message that tells you wrongly that you're late, or everyone's already doing it, everyone's already done it. See, you can see all the people on your feed that are currently doing it. So I think now more than ever too, there's this like message, unfortunately, that I think actually prohibits a lot of people from probably going after what they really want to go after, because it's already been done. And kind of to go back to what you're talking to about the late bloomer, look, I was extremely lost in my 20s. That's a very common narrative, but I'm from Chicago. I'm from the Midwest. There's a clear path. You graduate from college, you like move to the city, you get that job, and then you just like crank it, and you crawl up, and then you hang out with all your home friends, and maybe you marry your college sweetheart. I mean, it's a path. It's a clear cut path that a lot of people follow. But the issue was that that path never spoke to me. And so as a result, I ended up selling books door to door. They were not Bibles. They were not religious books, but I ended up selling books for 3 years after college, because I was just did not know what I wanted to do. And so
were they like encyclopedias? What were they?
Yeah. Okay. And it was like one of those scary jobs where you're like literally like dropped off in some small town, and you're like, go, and it's 100% commission. And
I mean, it could have been like Cutco knives. It could have been
and after a while, you get rejected, like literally like doors slammed in your face. Different things don't seem as scary. But yeah, so during my 20s, I just sort of watched a lot of my friends, kind of climb the corporate ladder. And I really didn't like figure out what my path was. And by the way, that wasn't even the right path until I was almost 30. I had a really slow burn. And eventually when I did, I got into traditional media. So I ended up getting an internship in a local TV station. And then I ended up getting, an internship actually abroad at CNN. And once I did that, things started kind of taking off quickly. And then my most recent job, my longest stint in corporate America, I left corporate America in 2016, I was a producer at the Today Show for 6 years. And then prior to that, I was at Bloomberg TV for a year. So I got my way there, but honestly, it wasn't until I hit 30. So the ages of like between 30 and 35, like I really kind of kicked it into high gear, 30 to 34. But it was hard. It was kind of hard watching all your friends, get married, get engaged, like, get promotions, and you somehow internalizing that, thinking there's something wrong with me. Like, what did I do wrong? And I'm, is this just what it's going to be? And so, yeah, I have a soft spot, and interesting, because I was an intern, so late in my life, even when I was at the Today Show and all my media jobs, I had such empathy for interns because, especially in TV, I don't know exactly what your background is, but, some of those, I was working in New York television, it's pretty cutthroat. And, interns can, they're easy people to not pay attention to or to take for granted. And I was always like, I couldn't even ask an intern. I'm like, no, don't do that. I will do that. Like, you do not need to do that. I was so overly conscious of, because I remember feeling very embarrassed, even, because when you're pushing 30 and people didn't know I was pushing 30, they thought I was younger. And it just kind of fed into this mentality that I was too late to the game.
Absolutely. I have a lot of questions that have come out of that, but I did something similar. So I saw that you moved to New York. I did as well in like 2010. And I had started like a whole life. I started a video production company here in North Carolina where I live now and where I grew up. And I completely just took a left turn and moved up there and struggled for a while, and then I got a job at a post-production house, Deluxe Entertainment.
Okay.
Over on the west side. So they were working on a lot of the narrative shows and films that were shot in the area, and basically like color correction and post services.
Yep.
But all of my peers were like early 20s, and I kind of was like, God, why didn't coming where I come from, like I didn't even know that was an option, to be
Yes.
honest. And a little bit of that is my ignorance, and a lot of that is like just not having anyone help guide me from Little Washington, North Carolina. But all of my peers at that job I was like 28, 29, and they were like 22, 23. And I definitely had that feeling as well. So yeah, I saw a lot of similarities in our journeys and finding our paths. And then I kind of veered off and went to make a film. One thing I want to go back to the selling to selling Bibles.
Oh God, no!
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. For anyone that's joining late, no. So I wonder if, because I can only imagine there's a lot of rejection in that type of business, and you're nodding your head yes. Do you think that type of rejection helps with resiliency? Right now, you've reinvented yourself, it seems, several times, and this whole theme we're already circling around about being a late bloomer, so to speak. Do you think just getting used to the door, shutting your face literally and figuratively, helps with that?
Look, I think at the time you're going through that, you don't have maybe that
Right.
wherewithal, right, to kind of step
Of
outside
course.
yourself at like a 360-degree angle. But now that, I'm older, now that I'm a mom, I have 3 young kids, even my childhood was not cookie cutter, right? Like
Yeah.
biological dad left my family at 5, never knew him, like, just not, didn't have like, my parents didn't have a great marriage. So like, I think, there's mental illness involved. And so I think now
Yeah.
that I'm older and I can look back and reflect and look at some of my childhood experiences, and at the time it's like, I'm not like maybe other kids I know, or my family isn't like other families. But now that I'm an adult, I think it's such a gift. And I know you've mentioned this in a lot of your TikTok videos, you're so brilliant. And that's why I was originally attracted to your TikTok page. Like everything you were saying, I'm like, oh my God, he's in my brain. This is what I say. But it's like that resilience. And it's, I think little did I know that all those little chips and all those little kind of like knocks was prepping me for an adult when things don't go your way, or yeah, you're maybe not on the path, but when you kind of live through some stuff that isn't like nice, then some of those things don't seem as bad. So yes. So longer answer to your question, absolutely. I do believe that selling books door to door for 3 years straight and being very good at it, becoming good at it. I was not good at it in the beginning, but by the end of my 3rd year, I mean, I was like, do I sell books door to door for my entire life? Like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Because I was good at it. But I do think like, yeah, you just build an armor, and also you learn to not focus on the door slam, because you just go to the next one. So it kind of preps you for that hard, tough, and that you need when you do run your own business. And when you do start something that's scary, you have to have a little bit of armor. Otherwise it becomes impossible.
I mean, I got kind of chills when you were describing that, and if you have seen some of my stuff, and I'm pretty open book with my life, like, without going too deep into it currently and taking away from the conversation, like very similar childhoods, right? Like a lot of well, obstacles and things to overcome, but I really resonated with that. And did you say that I was brilliant? Did I hear you say?
I did.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up again for
Yeah,
anybody listening. No, I appreciate that. By the way, you mentioned TikTok, which I had said this on TikTok to you. I know you were kind of new to the platform, or you had said you were taking a break or something like that. But like, I just really encourage you to dedicate some more time there in this year, just because like the opportunity is massive. I mean, your content is it's great, and obviously it resonates with people. And if you've been on the fence about like fully diving into it, I'm not like being pushy here, but I'm just saying like I highly suggest that you do,
oh, push
be-
me. I need it.
because and you don't have to create new content, right? But like your story, I know 100% if you just stay consistent with it, because that's how it works, will resonate with people like 100%. So that's my little push for that. I think that you'll do quite well on it. So man, I could really veer into that space of the dark forest, of our stories and trudging through them. um that might be a whole nother conversation, but it's super relevant, right? Because in anything that we're trying to accomplish, like this is relevant, whether it's our own stories, helping people tell theirs, etc. I'm curious a little bit about your position at the Today Show. I know you were producing. Were you like mostly booking talent? Were you like, what exactly were you doing there?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the traditional sense of producing, I was responsible for pitching stories. I
Hmm.
was responsible for getting my stories approved. Once my stories were approved, I was then responsible for writing the stories, getting the talent. I would often be in the field.
Oh,
I
cool.
also did a lot of producing reporting for digital. So I actually did a lot of my own stuff. So
Right.
I was really involved with the refugee crisis. I embedded myself for a week with, some American women that met each other online, and we went to Greece and we passed out baby carriers to refugees coming in from the boats off of Turkey. Like, I mean,
Mm.
that job runs the gamut. Booking guests, but I wasn't a booker in the sense. But when you're a producer, you wear a lot of hats, and
Yeah.
every day is different. I was doing live segments. Sometimes I was on the plaza. Sometimes I was, in the orange room, and they still had the orange room in studio, like breaking news, whatever, you're in it. So it was an amazing experience. And it's funny, the only reason I got that job, because I was woefully underqualified, I didn't have the background, was because of my door-to-door jobs. I swear to God, the guy that hired me, who got my foot into NBC, I interviewed with him, and he told me, he's like, he's like, you're like, this is like, you have no skills that I need. Like, what I need to like fill this job at NBC is not you. But for some reason, we ended up talking about, he's asking me all these questions about my personal life and background, and selling bookstores or came up. And I ended up getting this job. It was the job right before I got my producer job at the Today Show, but I got another producer job within the company, and we did a lot of stuff for the Today Show. And he's a mentor now. Oops, sorry. He's a mentor now, but he tells me to this day, the only reason I hired you is because you sold books door to door. So it was like your ethic was there, the character was there. I could teach you how to shoot video. I could teach you how to edit. I could teach you how to like write a script, but you can't really teach that resilience of like getting knocked down. So it's so funny how life gets full circle, and the
Totally.
lost years ended up being the reason that I got my opportunity to really hit it.
It's incredible how often, like how that happens, right? And when, back to your point about getting the rejection, like in the moment, you don't see it, right? You don't see the end of your story. And this is actually something I have a keynote speech that I present that talks about this. Is like when you're in the middle of it, in that dark act two, it's so hard to see like the end of it, and you think that is the end of it.
Yes.
And if you just kind of trust the process and keep moving forward, keep turning and pivoting and doing what you have to do, like it's really
You get out of it.
outstanding.
It's a long game though. And I think that's
Yeah, for
something too
sure.
we have to remember, anything worthwhile and anything that has impact or anything that I think really brings you a lot of joy, it's a long game. I know I was even just a really quick story, I was in Mexico City for my 10-year anniversary and I was with my husband and like 12 of my friends. And it occurred to me that I was staring at people that I've known for 20 years. And I was staring at my husband, who I've been married to 10 years. And it was the greatest week of my life. And I kept thinking, you know what, though? This is a long game. This is a long investment. Like 20 years I'm here, but that's 20 years it's taken, right, for these friendships, and 10 years with my husband. And it just was sort of a reminder to me in terms of business that, like, business that, an impact type of business or a legacy type of business, not a quick hit Instagram wonder, those are easy. It's the longer businesses that are more challenging, but it's the long game. So it's like that keeps me motivated. Like, it's okay if this week doesn't go right, this month doesn't go right. It's the long game.
Such a great point. Such a great point. And anybody that we look up to that has real success agrees, right? And it's so much more about persistence. What did you learn about storytelling in that position?
For the today, when I was at, and
Yeah, yeah, like, thinking about, like, coming into that and probably having no experience, maybe a little bit of, like, innate knowledge
sure,
about that because you
sure.
were writing, etcetera, but what lessons did you learn through that position about storytelling that you probably apply now?
Yeah, no, that's it's so much. Just off the top of my head, the Today Show is maniacal about their audience.
Mm,
So, for
yep.
example, if I wrote a script for a story that I'm producing and I'm in the editor room, in an editor booth with my editor, everything has to get approved. So before that story airs, it goes through 3 layers, right? And so the top layer, the final stop is usually your executive producer on the show. And so the executive producer would come in, and within 5 seconds, if that is going to be on the chopping block or if he or she is going to move you forward. And many of my stories hit the chopping block because I was not in the head of the person watching the story. I was in my head, Patrice, and what I thought, and like what I thought was most interesting. And it was drilled upon me over and over again that this is about that person, who watches the Today Show, like who really is that person, what do they feel, what are they thinking when they're turning on the morning show? Is it, probably chaos, the kids out the door, it's not like, women sitting on the couch watching, it's what is going on. And so it really forced me for every story to actually think about them. And it's one of the reasons why, for example, one of a story I actually went on to win a few awards for is this refugee story. Now, the Today Show is not a nightly news 60 minutes program, right? So, whatever you might think of that, for better or for worse, they're not doing hard news most of the time, not really, not in depth, because that's just not the nature of the show. And that's not what the majority of people want to listen to first thing in the morning, right? But I felt really passionate about this particular refugee story. And it was right about the Syrian refugee crisis. There's no way that my boss would have ever approved, hey, can I embed myself abroad and we do and do a story about the Syrian refugees? They'd be like, get out of here. But I angled it. I angled it in a way where I knew that it was the exact perfect angle for the person watching our show. And it wasn't, it took me a few tries, but I got approval, and it went on to be this wildly successful story. Yet had I pitched it maybe the way I'm like, well, people should care about the Syrian refugees.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why don't Americans care about what's going abroad? Like, that's just ignorant. If I would have gone with that angle, I would have been like, get out of here. So I had to really flip my script. And I always take that with me, that whenever you're doing stories, it really is not about you, the teller. It is about the person that is watching that story, and they care about themselves. They care about their life. They care about what they'll give you their attention, but you better make it worthwhile their attention because they want it to matter to their life. So that was biggest takeaway that I took from working at the Today Show, because they would not air anything, or you couldn't get anything approved if you did not go in with that thinking,
Mhm.
because they'd be like, no, like, get out of here. We don't care what you think.
Yeah. Do
Mhm.
you remember how you like manipulated that pitch
Oh, I
to
do. I do.
can we dive deeper into that? I'm super curious because
You
I
want me to?
like it's
Yeah.
very clear to me why that would be hard to pitch to the Today Show. I get it, and I'm super interested in like what was the way you kind of
Yeah. So, all right, let me do cliff notes here. So
yeah.
it was about 2015.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember this, but there was a very particular haunting image of a little boy in a red shirt that was washed ashore on a beach with his face down
Yeah.
on the beach.
Yes, I actually do. Yeah.
And I remember when you are in a newsroom, there are hundreds of TVs. You are so desensitized, and I hate to say this, but you just are. It's just constant. You don't even look up half the time. You could see something awful, and you're just like, oh, okay, back down because I'm on a deadline. I'll never forget. I was at my desk and in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden I look up and there's this little boy face down on a beach in a red t-shirt. And I had just given birth. So I was a brand new mom. Okay. And I remember it took my breath away. I stopped, I paused, I stared at the TV, and I just remember seeing on like the ticker, Syrian refugee crisis, like Turkey. And I remember being like, well, why don't I know about the Syrian refugee? What's going on with the Syrians? Like, huh? And I remember I got so into it. And I remember I was on my Facebook one night and a random GoFundMe popped up. And it was this random woman in California. She was a mother. She goes, hey, moms, any of you see that awful image of the boy? I can't sleep at night. I don't know what I can do, but I want to raise $5,000 for baby carriers because if I'm a mom and I'm a refugee and I have to carry my 2-year-old that I can't even carry anymore, like they don't have carriers. So I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm just going to contribute. Was not even thinking story. Week later, I'm like, I wonder how that GoFundMe is doing. I clicked back in and the GoFundMe was at like $15,000. And I don't know what came over me. I'm getting the chills actually, because it's one of these moments where I don't know what came over me. I reached out to her and I would never do this normally. And I said to her, I'm a producer at the Today Show. I had no approval, and you don't do this. Everything's hierarchy there. I said, I don't know who you are, but I need to. She was collecting carriers and she was just going to go deliver them abroad. And I'm like, I need to be with you. I need to follow you. What are you doing? So we started talking on the phone. And I'm like, I need to embed myself with you. This is amazing. Because she was bringing all these American women that did not know each other, that all of a sudden cared about this random crisis that most people couldn't even locate Syria on a map, let
Right.
alone care about people that are like leaving the country. And she made all these American, middle of America moms band together. I'm like, this is amazing. So I remember I went into work and I went to my boss, marched in his office, and I was like, I have the best story. And I'm like expecting him to like leap out of the chair. He stares at me because, and he just looks at me and he starts like laughing. He goes, no, like, no, what are you talking about? Like, and I remember I was so taken aback. Like, it was one of those moments where I was looking at him and I'm like, I am not letting this go. And so I remember I've never done this before, and he probably could have fired me for insubordination. But I went to my desk, I wrote an email, and I wrote an email to the head of, so I was still doing digital work. So anyway, I wrote a letter, I wrote an email. My boss was copied on it. It was to the head of digital. And then I put his boss
Hmm.
on this email who ran the network. And I wrote an email and I'm like, hi. I said, I have an amazing story. I said, being a news organization, this is exactly what we're here to do, right? Public service. I said, here's the story. Here's what I'm willing to do. I don't care how it gets done, but like, I will do whatever it takes. This story needs to be told. My boss doesn't want it for the show, but I would think somewhere in this company, this story has a home. Within 2 minutes, the head of digital goes, this is amazing. Whatever you want, like, we'll take it. If you'll do this, we'll take it. My boss writes me an email. He goes, get back in my office. I thought I was going to get fired. And I walked, because I put his boss on it and his
Yeah, I know. I get it.
and so, who, by the way, is like still there. But they're all there. They're all still there. And so I came back into his office and he goes, first of all, never do that again. And he goes, second, I will let you do this story, but you're not getting any talent. I'm like, perfect. I don't want some talent flying in first class from like London, to be like standing in a refugee camp,
Right.
reporting live. I'm like, fine. I'm like, I was like pregnant. I'm like, I will do it myself. So I did convince him to let me have one of my colleagues who had some UN experience, and the two of us went. And anyway, my point is, the way that I framed it to him and the way that he saw it, he eventually got it and he understood. And it ended up, I won I mean, I was flown to LA with like all the popular kids. Like I won an award. Like it was on every single network. It was picked up by Huffington Post. It was picked up by Upwork. And then I actually went again when I was 7.5 months pregnant to another refugee camp later that year as a follow-up, because what ended up happening was these bands of women, these mothers, formed a non-for-profit that still exists today. And because they were on the Today Show and they were exposed, they catapulted. So the power of media, like, whatever Today Show maybe doesn't have the reach it did, but all those shows like are, invaluable exposure. So anyway, but the only reason is because of the way I angled the story with the mothers, American women, caring. We all have a universal language. Doesn't matter where you're from. We can all put ourselves in the shoe. When you see those pictures of parents carrying their kids across boats, it's like you want to die. So that's how I did it. Angled it for the audience at hand.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's such an not easy way, but like it's clear to see the empathy there when you just zero in on that moment of carrying your kid. Like it's like kind of like you're saying in the newsroom, it's easy to like see it and just
Yeah.
not really look at it, right?
I know.
But zeroing in on that specific moment, like, no, picture yourself, this is your child. I mean, and just something small, like, how hard it is just to carry your baby up and down the stairs. And so think about it when you're like fleeing a country.
Well, it's universal. And I feel like you've touched on this before too. I always say to people, like, if you're struggling with something, just the other day, a woman she's doing a keynote on a stage in front of 150 white dudes, white tech dudes, right? She is not a white tech dude. And she was struggling because she's like, I'm doing this speech and I don't even know how to start. So I said to her, all right, you're not them. You're not a white tech dude. Doesn't matter. I said, but let's think about their journey. Let's think about like if they're in the room, what they've had to do to probably get there. And we ended up on, a certain type of struggle that she had that probably most people in that room could relate to. So again, it's like finding the one universal connector of emotion. There's certain emotions every human being has, no matter how rich, poor, what race you are, what country, whatever. And if you can hone in on that, which in this case of the refugee story is that every parent loves their child, no matter where you're from. And every parent would do not anything you could to protect your child from danger. So if you could bring that to the level of that parent instinct emotion, then that's how you can get other people from the other side to understand and care about the Syrian refugee crisis. Like, so that's why stories are so powerful, right? It's using universal emotions to really make other people that might not care.
So when did you feel the call to make this shift and go and like launching out on your own?
It was not conscious. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah. I never aspired to be an entrepreneur. I never
Okay.
aspired to run a business. This is like total random chapter in my life. Yeah. So I was at the Today Show, living high. I was on maternity leave with my second kid because I went back twice. So I was 7.5 months pregnant, had my baby, went on leave, and actually I got into Snapchat. Remember Snapchat?
Yeah.
Like the intern Phoebe at CNN, she's like, you'd be really good on Snapchat. I'm like, I'm a mom. No one cares about this. And lo and behold, because I was so, maternity leave is like not a vacation. I was like, but like, I need to be creative. I'm like, I'm so bored. I started getting into Snapchat, and this random person who used to be at the New York Times was following me on Snapchat, and he reached out to me on LinkedIn. He goes, this is insane. He goes, I'm not your target audience. He goes, but I cannot stop watching your videos. He goes, can you come and run our video team? I need to meet you. And so on maternity leave, I ended up getting recruited from from a media startup, a bunch of like, they're still around. It was sort of at the time when no one knew Facebook was like inflating views and everyone wanted to get into video. Like
Yeah.
it was like peak BuzzFeed, right?
Yeah.
It was like, 39 billion views, and like advertisers are salivating because they're like, oh my God, I have 39 billion views. It's like now we know, like, no. But
Right.
that was that time. And so it was this, I went to my boss on maternity leave because it's a small industry. You don't want to burn bridges. I was like, oh, this is what they're offering me. He's like, go. He's like, get out. He's like, go do something. Like, tell us all your tales of like learning, new things.
That's
So
awesome.
I ended up going to this startup and it was an absolute disaster. It was the worst professional experience. It crushed me.
Oh,
Yeah, it was like one of these like life changing moments, like sliding doors. It was not the plan. My husband had left his job to take a risk, so I was like the health insurance. I was
oof.
living in New York City, a baby and a toddler. It was really scary, and I remember like my life just kind of flashed. And so I kind of had a decision at the top of 2017: do I go back to corporate America? But honestly, I had no esteem. I was so low that
Yeah.
the thought of even being in a chair and interviewing and having to explain to someone like why I'm the best person, I would have been like, you know what? No, they just passed me by. Like I was just that low where it was just, it's
Mhm.
amazing how quickly, like 120 days prior, I was in LA, like getting an award on stage with like all these like fancy TV people. And literally 4 months later, I was like a shell of a human, just
So,
couldn't even make a decision because all of my it's like my processing was so
oh
off.
yeah.
I doubt
Everything is off. Everything is off.
off. I couldn't even like, someone would be like, what do you want sushi or do you want pasta? I'd be like, it's like, it was really like that. It became that basic where I'm like, I
I
don't
know.
trust anything that I do
Oh.
because this environment was so toxic. And so, the Today Show is such a wonderful place to be, and NBC, it really is. It's a really great people, smart. Yeah, sure, it's competitive, but like no one's shady. This was a whole other bag of goods. I was not equipped. I was just like so Pollyanna, and so it didn't end very well for me. So I ended up like I ended up getting laid off, and
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's kind of when this new chapter arose where I had a friend that had a startup and he's like, do you want to make a video for me? And I was just like, I had nothing. I was like, okay, I knew how to shoot video. I knew how to edit. I knew how to write, but I was not thinking this was a business. I was like, let me get my esteem back into top shape. And then when my esteem is good, then I'm going to go back and interview for TV jobs or whatever that is, the media. I'm going to get back into the media world, but I just have to make some money. I have to get some income coming in. I had a bit of a severance from this, which I think is important to mention. So I had like 3 months of health insurance, basically. So I kind of had like 3 months, right, to kind of get my esteem in shape, figure it out. But as life does, that job turned into another job, and then another job, and then all of a sudden you're like in it, and then and here I am, 5 years later. So my company has changed a lot, and what I do is huge.
Sure.
That's the origin story of it, of like how I got
Mhm.
into entrepreneurship. It was totally not intentional.
What is the difference, if any, in brand storytelling and the type of storytelling that you learn to do at the Today Show?
What's the difference between the brand storytelling, like
Like approach, model, structure. Is there a difference, or is it the same thing? You're trying to move people emotionally, or is there, are there different ways you approach it?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's an interesting question because the industry has changed a lot.
fair.
So I remember, this startup job I took,
Mhm.
my job was actually, I was working with brands. I had never been on the brand side of storytelling
Right,
because, you're an editorial. It is sacrilegious to go to the other side. I mean, it was the line in the sand
right.
was still very hardly driven back in 2016. It was changing a bit, but you had commercials and ads, and then you
Mhm.
had editorial storytelling. They did not mix. And honestly, I hate to say this because it's such an overused example, but it was truly brilliant. The Dollar Shave Club, that video launched 1,000 chips. That was one of the first videos that had the reach that all of a sudden people were like, am I watching an ad? Because this is the most entertaining story and video. By the way, he used to work at NBC. This is the most, it like blew people. I remember when it came out, I remember like my mind was blown and I was like, holy cow. And that was like right around that period. I think I was like, I don't remember the exact date, but it was percolating around that time period.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I went into this startup job, and my role was to kind of lead the video team, but the role changed. So I was thrust into the brand side. I'd be sitting at the table with like Unilevers and like these big CPG brands, and they'd be talking about the stories they wanted to tell. I'd be like, this is horrible. I remember being like, this is horrible. Like, this is the worst. This is not a story. It is a straight up ad. No one's going to care about this. No one's going to watch it. But they were coming from such a marketing point of view that they had blinders on. So it was only about the product and how they can push the product. It was not actually about the experience of who had a big sit through this awful story. It's not even a story, this video that you're making them watch. So I remember the wheel started turning a little bit, because I remember I would be giving suggestions and I'd be writing scripts and they'd be like, oh my God, I was just writing scripts like I was at the Today Show, like editorial, like you're not selling anything at the Today Show. You can't, you actually cannot. So you had to actually write a story. And even if there was a product involved, you could never lead with the product. So at the time I remember thinking like, why don't they just let people at the Today Show write their ads? Like, it would be amazing, but not thinking that actually that's what I would do. And so I think the answer to your question is it's changed now. And I actually think that the industry has caught up to probably what a lot of journalists and producers were already doing in their day jobs, which is telling stories in an entertaining way, hooking people off the bat, making sure it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, making sure there's a payoff to the audience, making sure that there's an emotional connector, all those things that you are naturally doing or taught to do as a producer or a journalist. Now brands understand that. And so now that's why when you see a commercial now and it's really bad, it almost stands out even more, because I think the content and the storytelling has really infiltrated brand world in a positive way. So I actually think the world now that I was in, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it actually mirrors the brand stuff that I do now in a much bigger way than even it did a couple years ago. That was a really roundabout way, but
No, I love what you said, and it's such a good point. And honestly, I think it's the first time it's been made that clearly on the show. It's very, very true, and I'm here for it. And I think people like you and I probably are. But I love that it's changed in that direction. Let's talk about video a little bit,
yeah.
or a little bit more straightforwardly, because I know that's a big part of your platform and what you do and your approach to storytelling, as it is with me as well. Why is it such a powerful tool? Let's start there.
So, okay, so there's two different hats here, right? There's, and I'm going to take it from the perspective of solopreneur hat, because I'm
Lovely.
guessing that most of your audience is probably in that vein, or they're running a side hustle, or they're
We're close, yeah.
Look, small business owners need to take all the unfair advantages, in my opinion, right? We don't have large marketing budgets. We don't have the luxury of just like, oh, I want to do that, so I'm just going to hire for that, especially in the beginning. And if you're just a smart business person, you have to take on a lot of that work in the beginning. You just have to, right? I mean, like people that have a lot of money and put a lot of money at things, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So the more you understand about doing the work, then you're actually able to better outsource. But that's another conversation. So for me, the video part just comes at a very economic level. Like, video is a really great way to even the playing field with the bigger players. So if I'm a small business owner and I am able to succinctly get on video and say something that speaks to the people that I'm trying to attract, and they think like you're in my head a lot, Rain. Like, you're speaking to me. Like, I don't know you at all, but your TikTok videos, I saw you and I binged you. I was like down the rabbit hole, right? For a good half an hour, saving your videos, like just feeling validated, like, oh my God, like I say similar things. Like, that's awesome that someone else in this world is like saying similar things, and I don't even know them, and I found them because of your videos. Like, so I think in seeing someone's face and hearing someone's voice, it's really easy to hide behind a post. It's easy to put one photo up, and you could be having the worst day of your life. You could be having a huge fight with your husband, but you put up a video, a picture, and you put a caption, and that picture takes on a new meaning. It's a lot harder to do that with video when it's you speaking. It's harder to actually not be, sure. Can people be fake and not real? Sure. But takes a lot more work not to be your normal self. So as a result, the people that are small business owners that are able to get on video and talk and share their perspective and share their insights and bring value to their people, you are now able to rally a loyal community. And that is what all the big brands want. Just to give you a little bit of insight, because remember, I have another side of my business where I just work with brands. It's amazing how many times I will have marketing teams asking me, what's going on social? What's going on Instagram? Like, who's killing it in your world on TikTok? What are they doing? The big brands want to act like us.
Yeah.
Yet us, especially in the beginning, we try to be bigger than we are. We try to be like, oh, or let me have info at Patrice Poltzer Creative get back to you. And it's like, oh, that's just me on another email. Like, I always tell people when you're starting out, like, do not try to be bigger than you are, because the big brands, they want your secret sauce, because the bigger you get, the further and further you actually get away from your bottom line of the people that are like your people. We're so lucky. Like, we're like rubbing elbows. Like, the big brands, what they're spending all this money to do that, to actually replicate that. That's why video is so important. It's like, you're not using video, you are leaving such an unfair advantage that only you have on the table. And you can't do that when you're small business. You got to use everything smartly, and it's free.
Incredible point. And you're right. I think it is changing, and I'm glad it's changing, but you're right. A lot of us still kind of by default try to emulate bigger brands or whatever, and don't realize the strength, the value that we have in just like being ourselves. That whole thing about like we here at whatever, that is so good.
Right?
But you're right.
You too in the beginning, like,
oh, all of us. Listen, that's why it's so funny, because we all did it, and many of us still do, and it's no shame to them, but it's like that's why the point is so incredible that you made. And now when I listen to it and look at the world and culture and how it's changing, just like what you just established about the editorial versus ads kind of like coming together now, there's this power in the solopreneur, as we've already used that word, right? There's this power of smaller brands now. And I think it's easy for them to overlook that when you're getting started, because you are doing so much, you're wearing so many hats. But there's a lot of power in that. So this leads me to another question that I think people struggle with in that vein. This is for the people who they're new, they know they need to use video, they're trying to get out there and do the things that you're telling them to do. They're struggling with these are all kind of cliche, but for a reason, being authentic, establishing their brand voice, whatever you want to call it, being comfortable on camera. They're all kind of jumbled in there together. So do you have any practical tips for people to get comfortable just being themselves? Because now we've established that there's power in that, right? Stop trying to be this, be you, right? And you resonate with my stuff because I'm me, and look, we know that we have similar journeys. So it's like, hey, I vibe with him. I felt the same way when you first reached out to me, and even more so now that we've had this conversation. But I know people struggle with this. I hear it all the time. So any tips for those people when it's just like, how do I show up and do that? I hear you on paper, it makes sense.
I know.
How do I do it?
I get it. And no, it's really, and I empathize with this greatly, because let's just put it into perspective. I started my business at the top of 2017. And at first my business was purely video making. So I had shooters, I have editors, brand comes to me, we make you video, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Then at the top, then COVID hits, right? And all my
Mm-hmm.
production stopped. So, and I'm pregnant with my third kid. I'm still in New York City.
Listen, wait, let's pause. How come every time the shit hits the fan,
Right?
you're pregnant?
I know. It's like, I never, oh my God, I
And
never made that connection.
every time your journey takes, it's a roller coaster, right? There's ebbs and flows. And every time it ebbs, you're like, I was 7 months pregnant.
I know. My poor third baby is the only one that has older siblings, because he's born in 2020, and no one in 2020 who had other kids was like getting pregnant. It's like,
Right.
no way.
Correct.
It was your
Correct.
first time, sure, not your third time.
All right.
So anyway, so I remember my production stopped. Pregnant with my third kid, I was like, oh shit, like here we go again, like, panic mode. I'm like, what am I? And also I'm like, I don't want to be running to like shoots with like a tripod and
Oh
like 5 backpacks when I'm like 80. Like, I was already thinking like, this is not sustainable for me anyway. I'm always,
man.
I'm going to set like, like this is not the entrepreneurial dream, So I remember being like, okay, I gotta pivot a little bit in my business. And I remember someone said to me, why aren't you, this is like a cliche term now, but like, why aren't you monetizing your knowledge? I'm like, what the F does that mean? And they're like, why aren't you teaching? I'm like, I'm not a teacher, number one. Like, why aren't you teaching other people like about video? And I'm like, because I'm not a teacher. Anyway, but I remember I kept thinking about what this woman was saying to me. And I remember she's like, you are missing a trick here. And she's like, you don't even see this. Like, this whole online world of selling and this whole online world of programs and coaching, I had never heard of that. I'd never heard of Amy Porterfield. I'd never heard of Maria Ford. This is only in 2020. I truly was like, I was so not in that world. I didn't know who Stu or God. And now I'm like, oh my God. Could not tell you these people like from Adam, right? But she sparked something. She showed me this possibility of people online and teaching. And I remember being like, oh my God. And I remember saying, she said to me, why aren't you using your Instagram for your work? At the time, it was like, look at my cute kid on the bridge with a pretzel, like #blessed. Like, it was personal. Like, it was not, I never even thought of using my Instagram for marketing or anything. I'm like, I didn't even talk about my business. And I remember I was low. I was COVID. I was making no money. I'm like, I got to make a change. And so I remember I started all of a sudden, like overnight, just started getting on my Instagram. And it took me 7 months. I'm not joking you, 7 months. Cause I remember I was pregnant. So I was like pregnant this whole time. It wasn't until after the summer that I started getting on video. I would do posts, I'd do like posts. I'd be like, oh, like be your own boss. I mean, I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. But I remember I was so scared to get on camera and open my own mouth because of all the things. And I came from TV. I came from doing this for a living. I did this with brands, yet I could not get up myself because I had all the same thoughts of like, people are going to think I'm weird. And what do I have to contribute? I don't know. I was just at the TV. Like, what does that have to do with showing people how to do stuff? Like, so I have such empathy for people that are afraid to get on video, because even though I came from that world, I went through the same hurdles. And the only way that I got through that, and this is such a boring ass response, but it's the truth, is I committed 3 times a week. 3 times a week, I was going to get on my stories. And even though I wanted to die and I felt so dumb and I felt like a fraud, I was going to just get on and I was going to give one tip about anything. I was going to give a little baby personal story about maybe like my corporate life. And then I was going to talk about a client. And I did that religiously for months. And lo and behold, you just start to get better. It's like anything you do. It's like, I was really bad at first. And then after about 3-4 months, I got into a groove. I found my voice. I found what people were responding to. I took energy and momentum from the DMs I was getting even if it was like, even if I had 10 views, if I had one person saying, oh my God, this was so useful, I just took that as a sign to keep on going. And so that is just everything in life in this journey, is like, you just have to like be willing to be really bad at it at first, and just know that everyone starts bad. Like, even in the Today Show, you have these people like that are on air every single day. And yet, do you know how many times they practice the good morning? They probably practice the hello, good morning. It's Monday, April 12th, 2022. They rehearse that 3 or 4 times before they go live. The good morning hello. And these are people at the top of their game. People at the top of their game never stop practicing. They never stop learning. And that is why they're at the top of their game. So it's not like, if you're starting fresh and you are comparing yourself to someone that has been doing this day in and day out for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, guess what? You only know about them when they started probably hitting that tipping point of explosion. You were not watching them when no one was watching them. Or like myself, when like my mom would be like, can you just go back to posting photos of like my grandbabies? Like, I don't care about your video. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's, you just have to like, long game, long picture, where do you want to be? And you're gonna get better. You just will. It's impossible to not get better, but you're gonna be bad for at least 3 to 6 months. And that's cool.
That was so incredible. That was so incredible. I'm like furiously trying to write notes, notes and quotes.
I need to ask you. I feel like I want to ask you. Like, you are, which is probably another conversation. I don't want to cut off your question, but like, never. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what this is, listen, just like
Yeah, well,
stories, this is a
you know what?
two-way.
It's like, you are so brilliant and consistent. And
God.
that is, no, I'm serious. You're really consistent. And that is the hardest thing about this. It's not actually
Well,
being, I think, quote unquote good,
isn't
define good. It's,
isn't this is such a bug out, like how the brain works, right? Like you just said that word, and the way I view myself, the story I tell myself, right, is that I really struggle with that. And it's just so bizarre. And I don't know who's right, me or you, but it's just funny how far the narrative, the stories can be. Like you just use that word, and I'm like, damn, I can't ever be consistent. So first of all, thank you for saying that. But it's just a little moment in psychology where it's just like, literally what I'm telling myself is you suck at consistency. And then I have someone else who just said that I was quote unquote brilliant. I just wanted to throw that word out there again. I'm still an artist, babe. I still have an ego. So and listen, I'm happy to talk. Like we can go live on something, we can just chat off to the side. Like
maybe that's a
I'm
different
so
one.
glad we finally like officially made this connection, because we've been kind of like circling around each other for a while. I just want to make a comment. I always like the way I interview, and this is how I do my documentaries as well, and what I kind of love about my whole process is like the themes just naturally start to emerge. And the one for me in this conversation that I've seen, the themes naturally emerge through the conversation. It's like this is your journey specifically, but also in stories and also in other people's journeys. Like what I've heard through this conversation today is that it's all about these like sometimes small, but these significant moments,
Mhm.
right? And for you, it's these very significant moments where you followed your heart. I know that's cliche, but it's so true. And each one of these like pivotal moments of you trusting yourself and just like kind of just going into
Mhm.
that tough challenge that you just talked about has proven to be successful for you. And it doesn't mean that there don't continue to be the ebbs to go with the flows, because you like you said, you've had this high with the Today Show, and then it went back down again, it came back up, and then COVID hit. And but this is the point, right? Because we all are going to deal with that, and the
Yeah.
point is the long game, right? And so you have this, it's kind of like a dual theme in this conversation where this the long game is so true. But when you have those moments where you feel that thing, and it's often followed by a feeling of fear, then maybe that's an indicator,
Yeah.
just following your heart there, and it's taking advantage of those moments. I think it's what you just ended on is like a perfect place to end the conversation for today. I want to ask one thing, just a small question before we go.
Yeah.
um we're here at the new year, like we talked about before we started recording. We both just came back from vacations, and we're kind of like just starting to get the wheels turning again. is there something, or what are you specifically trying to focus on this year? This could be personally or professionally, that maybe adjust or changes from last year. Could be doing more of what happened successfully last year. But yeah, like where's your mind at? Like what are you excited about for this coming year?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, because as you know, when you run your own thing, you have all the choices in the world, right? And
Right.
and actually the challenge, I think, of running your own thing is where to focus, and what path to go down and what path not to go down. Because I've gotten stuck where I'm down a path and it's not the right path. And if
Right.
you don't course correct, or if you don't pivot out of it, you get yourself in a real tizzy. And I think that's why a lot of businesses don't really make it, because it's like failure to pivot, or failure to kind of recognize the red flags. And so as a business owner, yeah, it's always kind of reevaluating. So I think for me this year, last year was a big transition year. Like last year was the first year that I started running higher ticket, intimate live program. So where I work with small groups of entrepreneurs for like 12-week period, and I get real into their business, and we create video, and we create founder stories. And it is like it's like a lot of you, right? You're in these
Yeah.
lives in the business, we're crafting their founder story, which quite often, founder stories can start from childhood, and a lot of them have, lots of things happen. And I didn't know if I was going to like it, and I loved it, right? So that was like okay, signal green. But I also realized that because you're developing so much time, I wasn't able to like do other things, and you have to keep cash flow coming in. So for me this year, I really am focused on, it's funny when you said keynote, I've never been on a stage before to speak. And so because I'm constantly, look, I ask people to invest in my programs, and I think I am always investing in myself as well. So I recently signed up for like a 10-week program where it teaches you how to write a keynote, and it teaches you how to do that type of speaking. I can do short form videos, I can do that, but like a 20-minute, 25, like that's more your world. Like that's not my world. So I'm curious. So I want to learn more about how to tell a story and keep someone engaged for like 15 minutes. And the other thing is, I want to start getting more into like corporate. I do a lot of work with solopreneurs, and I love it. But I also want, I'm starting to like, what, let's get out in the real world. I'm so behind a computer all the time. I'm like, what, like it's time to like get out back, like get,
Mm-hmm.
with people, and like
Yes,
live groups, and
it's
like,
important.
which is scary. Sometimes it's easier to be like, oh, I'm going to do a Zoom workshop and cool. But I'm challenging myself this year to get out in the open and like put myself out there. It's really scary. And also to TikTok, you're like
Yes.
just expanding audiences. Instagram is my
Mm-hmm.
home, and I love it. But I'm like, it's like about reaching. There's more people that I could help, and they have no idea that I even exist. So I need to do it.
Let's let them know. You heard it here, folks. Patrice is now available for speeches at your conferences and meetings and events. Listen, thank you so much. I feel like I could talk to you for a long time, and I hope that we do. I sincerely mean that. I hope we
Yeah.
like stay connected. And if you have any questions, like I'm fully and always available for that sort of stuff. But I feel like it will be like a mutually beneficial thing where we're kind of sharing
Oh,
wins and tips and techniques along the way, or I hope it will be at least.
100%. And I want to say, to you too, like keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, I literally found you on TikTok, and I was just down your content, and I save it, and I have like a saved folder in my Gmail for all like the newsletters that I like, and yours is in there. Like, you inspire me to keep doing things, and you like make me excited for my own work. So it's just a reminder to yourself that even if you're in
Thank you.
your own silo and you're in your,
Yeah.
whatever, your little bubble, like you
Yeah.
are affecting other people, and you're making me excited to do my work. And so that's awesome. So that's why, like, thank you. Like what you're doing is really awesome.
uh Thank you. It's really easy to like deflect when somebody says things like that, right? Like, no, you're great. But I can't tell, like, I'm honestly, like, feeling emotional right now. Like, it seriously means so much to hear that from someone who, like, I consider a peer, right? I mean, it means a lot from anybody, but, like, that means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
You're
Sincerely, thank you for
welcome. I mean
saying that. All right.